Greetings, friends, and welcome to the What's Right show. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Happy Monday. Since Friday afternoon, all hell breaking loose on Twitter, and of course, over the weekend, on the weekend shows, lots of discussion surrounding Tulsi Gabbard's broadside fired at Team Obama. I'll take you through everything you need to know about this. Sam at whatsrightshow.com is my email. Please email me there. Reach me with questions, comments, and concerns. Of course, also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at whatsrightsam. So, before I get to the actual allegations, which is, I would say, the most strongly worded condemnation of what Obama and his henchmen did to Trump during the 2016 campaign, which set off a chain reaction, ultimately resulting in expansive lawfare, not just against Trump as president and later as former president, but also against a number of Trump's allies and various administration officials who were caught up in the dragnet. I want to take you through the actual timeline of this, just so we understand what this is all about. Because frankly, by and large, what Tulsi Gabbard said publicly as the current director of national intelligence, as the DNI, she's not saying anything that's particularly revolutionary or unknown to us. This is important because a lot of people in the media, a lot of Democrats out there going, this is hocus pocus, whatever. This is politically motivated. No, this is the pot calling the kettle black. The entire shenanigans, the entire process that was initiated against Donald Trump was politically motivated. So if you go back to the spring even of 2016, remember Clinton at this point is the nominee, and her campaign orchestrates a narrative. Now, the narrative, as we've come to learn, of course, is that Trump is allied with Russia in some way, shape, or form. Trump and Putin are in cahoots. And it is the express interest of Vladimir Putin to have Trump installed as president, and thus Putin is orchestrating all sorts of things behind the scenes to aid and abet Trump. And another component of this, of course, was that supposedly Trump was compromised by the Russians. They had some sort of, tape of him with prostitutes in a hotel room in Moscow. This goes to the heart of the Fusion GPS file, the so-called Steele dossier, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee hire a law firm, a prominent Washington, D.C. law firm, Perkins Coie. They are the ones who end up hiring Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS hires Christopher Steele. And in June of 2016, Steele begins to compile the various memorandums and research documents that become the Steele dossier. It's opposition research, plain and simple. Now, brief aside, this is what all campaigns do to a certain extent. They certainly compile opposition research on the other side. You want to find out what their weaknesses are. You want to find out what various criticisms exist of their, even potentially scandalous things in their personal lives. You want to find this out, but this would be one of the first known times that anything like this would be passed on to a compliant and politically favorable, allied CIA intelligence community, read the federal government, and be used as a basis for a criminal investigation. This is exactly what happened. The egregious claim, for example, that Trump had hired prostitutes to urinate on a bed. I'm sorry, I have to put it in these vulgar terms. This is just what happened. I mean, that's the allegation. That Trump paid some hookers to pee on a bed that Obama slept in at the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow. That was in there. Totally unverified, no corroboration. Even CIA director, former CIA director John Brennan admitted later that it was completely unsubstantiated. But that didn't stop him in July of 2016 to brief Obama, Biden, and other officials in the government on this. By the way, they briefed him on Clinton campaign to smear Trump, tying him to Russia, right? This was all in the Durham report. And by the end of July, by the 31st of July, the FBI opens an investigation called Crossfire Hurricane. And this investigation, by the way, is based on a vague tip that George Papadopoulos is in the campaign, that he's somehow in the back pocket of the Russians as well. And so they're not even using at this point the Steele dossier. So by the way, get to the fall. And this is around the time, that they start internally at the FBI, Department of Justice, and the intelligence community to talk about an insurance policy. What if Donald Trump wins? And they were terrified of it. You remember the morning after Trump's victory, all those sad faces at the Obama White House, forced to come out of their offices and watch Trump meet with, well, that wasn't the day after, it was whatever, it was a couple days later, meet with Obama. Remember, Trump flew down from New York, on Trump Force One, goes down to the White House. I mean, I've never seen a group of more depressed people, but that also, at that very point in time, all of them knew that they had something to use against Trump, and they used it. So even before the election, Trump takes the FBI used this anti-Trump dossier to obtain surveillance. They use the Steele dossier, the opposition research, this pile of dog poop, okay, to obtain a FISA warrant on Carter Page. And it's egregious because the FBI literally edits a CIA email to omit Carter Page, that Carter Page was a CIA asset working with U.S. intelligence on Russia. They turn it around. Carter Page, at one point, literally working with the CIA to spy on Russia, and they edit it to make it seem as though Carter Page was, in fact, a Russian asset. There's an attorney, Kevin Kleinsmith, adds not a source to the email and submits it to the FISA court. Who told him to do that? On whose direction? It's one of many questions we intend to get to the bottom of. But this helps secure the October FISA warrant. And if you'll remember, this is the warrant that then was used to spy on the Trump campaign. The FBI never disclosed to the FISA court that the Clinton campaign funded the dossier. They didn't tell the court that Steele's source had already disavowed much of the content. And Steele was fired as an FBI source in November for leaking to the media. None of that, by the way, none of that told to the FISA court, but on it went. Now that they had they were literally Obama, who no doubt was supporting Hillary Clinton, is spying on Trump Tower, has Trump Tower bugged, can you imagine? Like this, by the way, this makes Watergate look like a walk in the park. It makes Watergate look like an absolute nothing burger. Brennan in December, after Trump wins the election, pushes the strongest version through an intelligence community assessment. Russia interfered in the election to help Trump. The NSA at this point in time says they only have moderate confidence, and Comey briefs Trump on the tape and the dossier contents in January, just a week or two before Trump is sworn in. And this enables media leaks. BuzzFeed publishes the entire dossier. And by the way, the mainstream media, well, nobody wanted to publish it. No mainstream media outlet at the time wanted to take the risk. But as soon as BuzzFeed put out the entire dossier, then the mainstream media could talk about the BuzzFeed story and echo the allegations. That too, by the way, I believe was done on purpose, deliberately, in order to cover larger media companies. So this is how it all started to come together. But the wreckage that it left behind, folks, is unreal. Now, it continues. So let me get through this here very carefully today, because I want you to understand what all happened and then what will happen as a consequence of a very united front by the Trump administration to get to the bottom of this. Will there be prosecutions? Will Obama himself be arrested? Great questions. I'll answer them when we come back. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right Show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam and Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. So, yesterday, Trump takes to Truth Social with an AI-generated video. Did you hear about this? The video is an adaptation. That's what we'll call it. An adaptation of a video taken of him and Obama when Obama was still president and Trump came to pay his first visit to the White House as president-elect. So he's sitting to the, if you're looking at him, to Obama's right on the left side. And this AI version of the video then has two FBI agents showing up and manhandling Obama, arresting him, hauling him off, and sending him to jail. Now, people are talking about this. Is the arrest of former President Barack Obama imminent? Can I just, 10 cents on this is, don't be too certain it's going to happen anytime soon. And of course, we're talking about now this, this renewed interest in something that many of us knew was happening all along, or at least we became aware of in the early stages of Trump's presidency, first presidency in 2017, that as early as 2016, Hillary Clinton, President Obama, the FBI, the intelligence community, the Department of Justice conspired together first to take Trump out of the race, and then later to scuttle his presidency, to burden it with so much investigations and allegations of wrongdoing that Trump would be forced to step down. Now, that's the thumbnail sketch of it. Is that a crime? Well, yes, of course. There's multiple felonies involved here. Do some of those felonies fall within the statute of limitations? Also, probably yes, but things need to get moving on this quickly. So one thing that I look at is some of these crimes, some of these predicate offenses, for example, would fall roughly in the 10-year mark. So if you're going to see arrests, if you're going to see charges getting filed, they basically need to get filed within the next year, within the next 6 months, maybe even. Okay? So I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just telling you, if the charges come, they have to come within that 10-year period. And you know, like, we got to get with it. So does that mean that Obama gets arrested next week? Well, no. You know, the way a criminal investigation works is you have an allegation. You have to, put the evidence together. You've got to get an indictment, or at least, file charges. And all of that requires a tremendous amount of legwork. Now, presumably, just because Tulsi Gabbard is talking about it now publicly doesn't mean that the Department of Justice hasn't already been working on it. It's very possible that they began working on this, quote unquote, on day one. I'm just a little concerned, look, again, the Department of Justice is bigger than the Attorney General. I'm hoping that there are enough, quality attorneys, high-ranking attorneys, and also support staff who are experienced criminal prosecutors, who are allies of the president, who are themselves perhaps people who have been touched by this lawfare that was initiated by Obama, Clinton, Brennan, Comey, et al., who are in there fired up, working 7 days a week to make sure that this gets done. But folks, it's not enough to just wave a magic pen. The way these prosecutions work is you've got to put in a lot of effort, a lot of hours. You've got to meticulously document the allegations, make sure you have evidence to support each and every one. Then if you want a grand jury indictment, you've got to present you've got to present the case to the grand jury wherever it's convened. And I'm not even getting into the fact of, do you get a grand jury, for example, in D.C. to return a true bill, to return a conviction? That's going to be tough to do. I'm going to be honest. But I mean, presumably it's doable. Maybe perhaps harder to get a conviction, but we're just talking about the arrests at this point. I have, over the weekend, this small little kind of human aside to the story, there are a number of people who were drawn in. These are aides. These are people whose names maybe you wouldn't even be familiar with, and that's okay. They're people that worked on Team Trump during the election, had some role in the campaign perhaps, or in the first Trump administration. And even if they weren't convicted, these are people who lost years of their life, who maybe had $200,000-$300,000 of hard-earned equity in their home, and that was it. That was their egg, like nest egg. That was all they had. Okay, and that went away the minute that they had charges filed against them by Mueller, I got caught up in all of this. I mean, that's not recoverable. Okay, it's not recoverable. Those people, I hear a lot of times people saying, "Well, yeah, but they got a pardon." They got a pardon? Let's think about somebody we know. Let's think about Roger Stone. Roger Stone was drugged out of his house at 6 a.m. by a militia. Okay, the FBI came down there as if they were arresting a high-level Al-Qaeda figure. And they called the media. They pulled Roger Stone, and then remember what Roger Stone was charged with? It all had to do with obstruction of the Trump-Russia collusion. That's it. That's what Roger Stone was sentenced to 40 months in jail. His sentence was later, of course, commuted by Trump. But he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of his own money on lawyers. Roger Stone was financially destroyed by this. That was their intent. When we talk about here, well, Sam, I don't know if Obama can even get convicted in D.C. They did this knowing Trump was president and that he could issue pardons to everybody, okay? And Trump did in many cases. They did this to financially destroy people. So an arrest of Obama, so he has to maybe sell his Martha's Vineyard house and has to, suffer a little bit like the rest of these people whose lives he ruined. Yeah, not a bad way to go. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840. Be right back in a moment. Rarely wrong, always right. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian behind the What's Right microphone. Welcome to the program, folks. Today, of course, over the weekend, Friday, big document dump. Tulsi Gabbard revealing a number of previously classified documents, confirming what many of us long suspected. Hillary Clinton, President Obama, James Comey, Clapper, Brennan, et al., orchestrating essentially a coup against a future president. And I say that because, again, the entire Russia collusion hoax began when Trump was running for office. They used it as a pretext to spy on the Trump campaign. And then later, when Trump was elected, became president-elect, and later president of the United States, they used it to sabotage his presidency. That's about as succinctly as I can put it. Now, we got to put a little reminder, a little historic note on this. My entire childhood, as I learned about U.S. history, and remember, this is 80s and 90s, Watergate. It was talked about in every class. Every liberal high school teacher of mine, history teacher, social studies teacher, brought up Watergate and Watergate. What is the general sense of what Watergate, what happened there? Right? Apparently, Nixon or people close to Nixon hired some burglars to go in and get stuff find documents at the Democrat headquarters in the Watergate building. So, at its essential core, Watergate was, the allegation, of course, against Nixon was that he was spying on his political opponents. Right? This is 1,000 times worse. Obama didn't hire some burglars. He weaponized our intelligence community. He used taxpayer-funded assets. He used the federal government to do his political dirty work. Under Obama, we became no better than some tin pot dictatorship country somewhere in Southeast Asia or Africa or the Middle East. This is awful. And anybody out there that defends it really doesn't know what they're talking about or has absolutely no credibility whatsoever. So here is Tulsi Gabbard Sunday on Fox talking about what this is really all about. This is, in her words, why the document dump that she put out on Friday, why it's relevant.
The implications of this are, frankly, nothing short of historic. Over 100 documents that we released on Friday really detail and provide evidence of how this treasonous conspiracy was directed by President Obama just weeks before he was due to leave office, after President Trump had already gotten elected. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is an issue that is so serious it should concern every single American because it has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. What we saw occur here, as the documents we released detailed, was that we had a sitting president of the United States and his cabinet and leadership team, quite frankly, who were not happy with the fact that President Trump had won the election, that the American people had chosen Donald J. Trump to be the next president, commander-in-chief of the United States. And so they decided that they would do everything possible to try to undermine his ability to do what voters tasked President Trump to do. So creating this piece of manufactured intelligence that claims that Russia had helped Donald Trump get elected contradicted every other assessment that had been made previously in the months leading up to the election that said exactly the opposite, that Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to try to, quote unquote, hack the United States election for the presidency of the United States. So the effect of what President Obama and his senior national security team did was subvert the will of the American people, undermining our democratic republic, and enacting what would be essentially a years-long coup against President Trump, who was duly elected by the American people.
And this is the stronger language now used that we've not seen from anyone, including John Durham, who was the Bill Barr-appointed special prosecutor to look into some of this stuff, who oddly missed a lot of this. That in and of itself is an interesting observation. Tulsi Gabbard now calling it a coup, a years-long conspiracy, a treasonous conspiracy, and an egregious abuse of power. Some of these words suggest to me, when she says years-long conspiracy, also an effort to extend some of the shorter statute of limitations for these cases, tying it all into a conspiracy with a series of predicate acts would allow prosecutions to run, into the coming several years. So big stuff. This is what was previously unverified. For the months preceding the 2016 elections, the IC, the intelligence community, we're talking here about the NSA, talking about the CIA, etc., shared a consensus view. They all agreed, real intelligence agreed, that Russia lacked the intent and capability to hack the U.S. elections. Robbie, you and I were, obviously, we were on the radio, we were out in L.A. during this time doing what we do now. And I remember all the times I was clearly and emphatically telling our listeners what? That there is no snowball's chance in HE double hockey sticks that Vladimir Putin wants Trump to win the election. I said that. I rested on this. My entire Putin's dream would be that Hillary Clinton become president. Trump doesn't want a disruptor. He doesn't want a wild card like Trump. Who knows what Trump's going to do? Trump's unpredictable. The Russians want to know how to play us like a fiddle. Ditto the Chicoms. Hillary Clinton was a predictable known entity, quantity that certainly the security services, the FSB, and the Russian, State Department all would be absolutely okay with. This is a fact. And all of a sudden now we know, and it's confirmed, right, that they lacked the intent, which is a fancy way of saying they never intended or wanted to help Trump, quote unquote, succeed politically, win the election, etc. By the way, look at Trump's NATO versus Obama-Biden NATO. That's a great point, Robbie. Trump's NATO has doubled their spending. Obama-Biden's NATO was on the ropes. Whenever I talk to libs who say, oh, Trump's a Russian asset, Trump's meh, I go, well, let's compare. Let's compare let's just compare the state of NATO today versus the state of NATO under Obama, and we can talk. Remember Trump warning Germany to get off Russian natural gas? I'm just saying. So this is interesting. What else? August 31st, the Department of Homeland Security official to Clapper, who was then the DNI, so Clapper was in the same position as Tulsi is now. We are working with CIA on a presidential daily briefing submission on the threat. The thrust of the analysis is there's no indication of a Russian threat to directly manipulate the actual vote count through cyber means. September 9th. We agree with the fact that Russia's not and will not try to influence the election. Okay? December 7th, following the election, activity on and since the election, DNI Clapper talking points. We assessed that foreign adversaries did not use, past tense, did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure. We have no evidence. There was, however, minimum targeting of election infrastructure, probably cyber criminals to steal data, although these efforts did not disrupt the election. What is a presidential daily briefing? I remember one time I had a phone interview for the CIA, Robbie, and they were trying to get me all interested in working for the CIA. And I was entertaining this. I was a young guy in my early 20s, and I have 3 passports, and I speak a language that would be beneficial, besides English, would be beneficial to the CIA. So I had some things that they wanted. And I'm just sharing this now, years later. It's nothing top secret about any of this. Okay, and the guy that was reaching out to me, he says to me, the stuff you write could end up, in the morning funnies for the president. And he was referring to like a comic strip, right? But what it means is the presidential daily briefing is what the intelligence communities put together, and they condense it all, and the president reads what he needs to know every day. By the way, the intelligence communities have a lot of power because they decide what the president reads and what he doesn't read. But that's not even my point here. My point is that the president, read Obama, who was in office at this time, knew from the intelligence communities, from all of these shady characters, that the election was not tampered with, past tense, definitively, save for a few cyber hacking criminal types, that are always poking around our digital infrastructure. And that right there is what we didn't know before. And it's the most important thing that you need to realize now. So I'm going to quick break here because going a little bit long, but I know I'm in the weeds here a little bit, but it's just good. It's so good. It's finally seeing the light of day. I could not be happier. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, What's Right Show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right. Welcome back, folks. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Show, brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law. So the Tulsi Gabbard document dump outlining the Russia Collusion Hoax and the resulting investigations into Trump and many others, the purpose behind which was to first harm Trump's election chances and, when elected, to derail his presidency. One of the most interesting things here I was mentioning just before the break was that on the 7th of December, roughly a month after the election, Clapper, Brennan et al. Put together a briefing for the president, then Obama, telling him in no uncertain terms that the intelligence community assesses that foreign adversaries did not breach or otherwise interfere with the election. This is what's crazy to me. Just 2 days later, on the 9th of December, there's a secret Russia meeting, and Obama officials meet to begin planning the Russia collusion hoax. They outline a new assessment to claim the election was hacked. There's an email to ODNI leaders. The IC is prepared to produce an assessment per the president's request that pulls together the information we have on the tools Moscow used and the actions it took to influence the 2016 election. An explanation of why Moscow directed these activities and how Moscow's approach has changed over time, going back to 2008 and 2012 as reference points. ODNI will lead the effort with participation from CIA, FBI, NSA, and DHS. In literally 2 days' time, 2 days, they went from saying, no, this couple of hackers, breached some stuff, whatever, probably looking for credit card numbers, to, all hands on deck. Russia acted in an unprecedented way. They interfere with the election. And by the way, we have all this dispositive proof from Fusion GPS to Steele dossier that Russia compromised Trump, that he is their Manchurian candidate. And so began an all-out effort to derail Trump. Now, the Russia collusion hoax obviously interfered with Trump's agenda. It interfered with, dare I say, democracy. But it hugely tied Trump's hands in dealing with Russia. It's not that hard to draw a straight line from the Russian collusion hoax to rising tensions with Russia to the Ukraine invasion. We're talking about a minimum of 170, 180,000 people dead, soldiers and civilians as a consequence. Higher estimates, somewhere in the 400,000 range. So I'm not even, and then we get into all the people whose lives were destroyed by this. Peter Navarro, Carter Page, even Roger Stone. People went to jail over this. People's entire net worth was erased. These were not wealthy individuals, famous individuals. These were people that had some equity in their homes, maybe had a college fund for their kids. All of that disappeared. And they did that by purpose, on purpose. Now, Barack Obama oversaw the politicization of the intelligence and manipulated it. As of right now, I don't think there's any direct evidence of ordering illegal action, but he could be implicated in a conspiracy. I wonder if they could bring a RICO case against him. Remember, you don't have to have full knowledge of every bad thing that happens, every illegal thing that happens in a RICO case. You just have to be a part of it. Wouldn't that be something? John Brennan, who was the CIA director back then, he led the push for the intel shift. Same with James Clapper, who was the director of national intelligence, promoted a collusion narrative, even though his own internal assessments contradicted it. So there's no doubt, by the way, these people, Clapper and Brennan, both of them testified to Congress under oath, claiming that this intelligence was out there, that Russia interfered. At the very minimum, there, I think, are going to be perjury charges here. Joe Biden is implicated in this. James Comey, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, who was the then FBI deputy director, he approved the FISA applications. He was accused of lack of candor under oath. Durham criticized, of course, his decision-making process. But, I mean, these are, lying to a judge, big deal. Peter Strzok, who I often refer to as Loverboy, who was in charge of FBI counterintelligence, he's the guy who led Crossfire Hurricane. Remember, he was texting his side chick, Lisa Page, who was then an FBI lawyer. In their texts, he routinely discussed how they had a quote-unquote insurance policy They were mad. They were angry. They were sad. They were upset that Trump won and Hillary Clinton lost. But don't worry, we have an insurance policy. It's how they were talking amongst each other. Remember, Bruce Orr, DOJ official, acted as a conduit between Steele and the FBI. Victoria Nuland, then Assistant Secretary of State, authorized initial contact with Steele, aided in legitimizing the dossier. Hillary Clinton, Mark Elias, he was a partner over at Perkins Coie. The whole thing started with him. He was Clinton's campaign lawyer. Mark Elias, by the way, going around filing all sorts of lawsuits even to this day, fighting, Trump's various orders. Mark Elias is a very, very active guy in Democratic circles. Certainly somebody who is an excellent candidate for the federal penitentiary. Yeah, Christopher Steele, Igor Danchenko, all these people. Now, false statements, obviously, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, federal misconduct, perjury, campaign finance violations. All these are charges potentially facing many of these players. So buckle up. It's going to be an interesting road ahead. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. Greetings and welcome, folks. The What's Right show is powered by Sam & Ash Injury Law. Before I get too deep into the news of the day, which I already have, I don't want to get any deeper before I wish my wife a very happy 20th anniversary. 20 years, Robbie. Can I share the story, by the way? The night that I met my wife. So, folks, if you're new to the program, producer Robbie on the other side of the glass from me, running the magic, behind the scenes, show prep, whatnot. My good friend from high school and college years and whatnot. So, people ask, how far back do you guys go? I get the question all the time, and my answer is really far back. Robbie was there at the party that I hosted the night that I met Sherry. He was there. And I do believe at one point, Robbie, you showed some interest in perhaps, taking Sherry home with you or whatever, following it. But anyway, didn't work out. I'm sorry. 21 years later or so, here we are. So funny story. I still remember that party. Honestly, Robbie, doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I think that's what's scary about time. And everybody tells you this. If you're in your 20s and you get these, people, these old farts telling you it goes fast, and you're disregarding it, don't. The old farts were right. They're always right. Listen. It goes so quickly. My son is going to be 18. Yeah, and like in a month, Robbie. Yeah, it's just absolutely wild how fast time flies. So happy anniversary, Sherry. Thank you for putting up with me for 20 long years. Okay. By the way, that would be a nice sentence in federal prison for some of these Democrats. They won't spend any actual time for any of this Russia collusion stuff in prison or any significant time because somebody somewhere down the road is going to pardon them. Of course, this is why we need to make sure that we win the presidency again. J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, whoever, in 2028 will be very, very important because let's say we get a conviction or two and somebody's actually in a federal prison rotting over the destruction, lies, and obfuscation they caused, a true attempt at subverting democracy, sabotaging and trying to eliminate a duly elected president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, 45, Trump 1.0, marred by the scandal that is now getting even further. By the way, I'm gonna play the clips, Robbie. I'm gonna play them here. I want people to remember what all of these clowns kept saying, even though they knew this was all false. And they didn't just say it in the media. They wrote it on affidavits. They signed it to FISA warrants and other warrants. They testified this way to Congress. They presented evidence in impeachment hearings. Here's Obama, even before the election, talking about how we really need to trust. No, this was right after the election, excuse me. And remember, let's see, it was on the 7th of December, and we found this out from Tulsi Gabbard, 7th of December, that the DNI, that Clapper tells Obama, no, there was no monkeying with the elections. The Russians did not interfere. 2 days later, they have a giant meeting in the White House to discuss how they're going to pull off this Russia collusion hoax. That was on the 9th. 5 days later, at the White House press podium, President Obama says this about the necessity that we trust the FBI and the CIA.
When you're talking about cybersecurity, a lot of it is classified, and we're not going to provide it because the way we catch folks is by knowing certain things about them that they may not want us to know. And if we're going to monitor this stuff effectively going forward, we don't want them to know that we know. So this is one of those situations where unless the American people genuinely think that the professionals in the CIA, the FBI, our entire intelligence infrastructure, many of whom, by the way, served in previous administrations and who are Republicans, are less trustworthy than the Russians, then people should pay attention to what our intelligence agencies say.
What we were watching was Obama lie and prepare the case against Trump in real time. If you think that the Russians are more trustworthy than you hear how halting his speech is? He is weighing each and every word, meticulously crafting, weaving together a lie based on everything that was happening behind closed doors in that very moment. Despicable. Adam Schiff, who now himself is facing allegations of mortgage fraud, which, by the way, are heating up quite nicely. Get into that in a moment. Schiff here's outlining the collusion. This is a supercut from 2017 to 2018. That's how long that this persisted. Trust me, the evidence is there.
All you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So, again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that there is evidence that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigations. So they can call it a fishing expedition, they can call it a witch hunt, it's all an aligned message with the White House, but nonetheless, real evidence is coming forward that just can't be ignored.
So we do know a lot more. I think the claims that there was no evidence of collusion have long since fallen away. The question now is, what is the quantum of proof here?
Christopher Steele may have found out, even before our own intelligence agencies, that the Russians were in fact aiming to help Donald Trump in the election. That has now been borne out by ample evidence.
I think you see the most palpable evidence of a collusion in terms of violating the Logan Act.
Look, I don't think you can seriously argue that the Russians weren't trying to help Trump and hurt Clinton, as well as sow discord in the United States. The evidence is quite overwhelming on this. It was the early conclusion of the intelligence community, but that's only been furthered by all of the evidence we've seen in our investigation. And
put out a statement and a report basically saying that they found no evidence of collusion between the Trump team and the Russian government. Have Democrats found any evidence of collusion?
Yes, we have.
Can you agree that there has been no evidence of collusion, coordination, or conspiracy that has been presented thus far between the Trump campaign and Russia?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
Look at that. In 2017, a year and a half after they knew the Steele dossier was an absolute load of animal poo-poo, Schiff is everywhere talking about how this is good intel, and is confirming Trump's various connections to Russia. If this was just a political smear job, but there were hundreds of people that got prosecuted whose lives were turned upside down, and a term in office that we sent Trump to Washington to clean up the Obama mess, and the Obama people basically sabotaged what we, the people, wanted to have happen. Here's Nancy Pelosi in 2017 in July at a House of Representatives press conference.
This week, we saw cold, hard evidence of the Trump campaign, indeed the Trump family, eagerly intending to collude possibly with Russia, a hostile foreign power, to influence American elections. In the month, again, as we celebrate the courage of our founders, Republicans in Congress have become enablers of the Trump-Russia assault on our democracy. After these latest revelations, it's becoming clear we have suffered a desecration of our democracy not seen since Watergate. Speaker Ryan must allow a vote on an outside independent commission to get to the bottom of the Trump campaign's role in Russia's assault on our democracy and prevent Putin from ever doing it again, immediately. Outside independent commission. It's not just about what happened in the past, it's to prevent it from happening again.
These people are absolute, complete, deranged criminals. I'd arrest all of them. Today, Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT, back in a moment.
The Sam and Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Show. Sam at what'srightshow.com, at What's Right Sam on X, formerly known as Twitter. So, fallout now underway from the revelations that there is, if anybody had cold hard evidence that Russia collusion did not occur, that Russia did not interfere in the election. The intelligence communities knew this was a fact as early as, let's say, December, what was that, 5th, 7th? The 7th of 2016, and yet they just would not stop with it. Evidence also of a high-level meeting on the 9th of December to, gin this whole thing up. Here is Brennan, who, of course, was a central figure in all of this, getting asked some questions under oath in Congress, May 23rd, 2017, year and a half later from that meeting where the whole, plan was concocted. Listen to him stutter through these questions.
Did you see evidence of collusion, coordination, conspiracy between Donald Trump and Russian state actors?
I saw information and intelligence that was worthy of investigation by the Bureau to determine whether or not such cooperation or collusion was taking place.
That doesn't help us a lot. What was the nature of the information?
As I said, Mr. Gowdy, I think this committee now has access to the type of information that I'm alluding to here. It's classified, and I'm happy to talk about it in classified session.
And that would have been directly between the candidate and Russian state actors?
That's not what I said. I'm not going to talk about any individuals.
But that was my question.
Liars. All of it liars. Oh, and yeah, they classified it. Yeah, to hide it as best as they could. Just burn all these people to the ground. Here's Peter Strzok, lover boy, having a little shtup fest there with Lisa Page, the FBI lawyer. Listen to what he had to say. This was in September 17th, 2020, talking about his book with Andrea Mitchell. This guy had the nerve to write a book. I hope every penny of his proceeds from this farce of a book get taken and spent in legal fees as he defends himself the way so many of his victims had to.
Now, your book is called Compromised. You believe President Trump is compromised by the Russians. You make the point of the way he talked to Lavrov and Kislyak in the Oval Office and the whole issue of Comey's firing, what he said to Lester Holt. But there was no proof established by the Mueller investigation.
Well, that's not quite true, Andrea. I think the Mueller investigation said that they were unable to prove to a legal standard or bring criminal charges that something had occurred. But they point throughout the report to a variety of deep counterintelligence concerns. When you add that to the recent bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report, almost 1,000 pages from a Republican-led Senate committee, laying out all these counterintelligence concerns, the data is too great to ignore. So, yes, I believe that the president is compromised by the Russians, and I think that takes a lot of form. I think it comes through financial entanglements that he is fighting to become known, that the Russians know about and can hold over him. I also think it comes from the way they're able to play into his ego and his strange fascination and coziness with dictators and authoritarians around the world.
You're going to jail, mother effer. What a POS. Let me tell you, it just, we lawyers, we like to say, we think we're very clever, and sometimes we're putting together a case and got an interesting theory of how to get it presented. And, but we always have to keep a certain sobriety, okay? A restraint, if you will, to not get too carried away. We lawyers, this is a cell phone. We think we're really smart sometimes, and occasionally we get too cute. And my mentor in this business, a guy named Mark Algori, who a tremendous trial lawyer in California, he always calls this getting, too smart by half, right? They got too cute with this. And I'm convinced that the consequence of this will be that it will unravel. Now, the media, of course, is going to, the media is implicated in this as well. This isn't like Watergate. Okay, Watergate, the media wanted to doom Nixon. There's no question of it. The media wanted to doom, so the media pulled out all the stops and attacked, of course, with full force. And so the scandal there, sort of cascaded a lot quicker than I think it's going to here. But that said, this will dwarf Watergate. Just by the facts. It is the largest political scandal in our country's history. And they're just, they think that's nothing to see here, right? By the way, if you're going to give it some epic moniker like this or comparatives, Jerry Nadler once said on Chris Hayes' program that Trump-Russia collusion is like if FDR denied Pearl Harbor. You remember this? I remember when he said this. We played this on the show.
Well, my reaction to the news is that this is absolute proof of what we knew all along and what the president has denied, namely that we were attacked. This was a very serious attack against the United States by a hostile foreign power, an attack against our election process, our entire governing process, that we know that the attack is continuing, and that our intelligence agencies tell us that it's going to certainly continue through the next election. And the president and the Republicans in the House, for that matter, refuse to do anything about protecting us from an attack. Imagine if FDR had denied that the Japanese attacked us at Pearl Harbor and didn't react. That's the equivalent.
Well, it's a bit of a different thing. I mean,
no, it's not.
They didn't kill anyone.
They didn't kill anyone, but they're destroying our country.
Do you really think it's you think it's on par?
Not in the amount of violence, but I think in the seriousness, it is very much on par. This country exists to have a democratic system with a small d. That's what the country's all about. And this is an attempt to destroy that.
It turns out that at the end of the day, the D that the Democrats were talking about was the big D. Trump was out to destroy the Democrats, the Democratic Party. And so the Democrats, big D, did everything, including and up to destroying the little d in order to save themselves. That's the takeaway from all of this. Now, I wasn't going to come back to talking about Steve Colbert with everything else going on, but there's some interesting developments on that. Plus, I want to get into Adam Schiff and his little legal troubles when we come back. Hint, hint, they're not so little. Speaking of little d, Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Nevada's favorite recovering Californian behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. Adam Schiff, the long-time congressman from Southern California, now senator from the great state of California, in a bit of trouble. Last week, we talked about how his mortgage that he took out on his Maryland residence. This, I presume, is where he lives when he's in D.C. There's an attestation in the file that, under penalty of perjury, says that the mortgage is the principal residence. And it's signed by not just Adam Schiff, but by Eve Schiff, who I presume is his wife. This was signed before a notary public, a Howard County, Maryland notary public. So these documents weren't even signed in California. They're signed in Maryland. 4th day of November 2021. If this is genuine, Adam Schiff is in a whole lot of trouble. Why? Well, either the statement is true or it's not true. If it's not true, well, then he has a perjury charge on top of potentially a mortgage fraud, bank fraud charge, which could be state or federally brought. Now, look, and if he, by the way, if it's, yeah, the other problem, right? The other problem is, if it is actually the correct statement, if he did not lie on the form, then of course he's not a resident of California. There's an elections code section in California, 2022, that details what makes you a resident or not. And the operative part of the section is a person who leaves his or her home to go into another state or precinct in the state for temporary purposes merely, with the intention of returning, does not lose his or her domicile. Now, this is so, meaning California has fairly loose residency requirements. You can say, listen, I'm leaving California for a period of time. As long as it's temporary and you intend to return, you can remain a resident. It doesn't even say for how long. But if you declare under oath the penalty of perjury that your principal residence is in Maryland, I think that violates that particular code section, it would then seem to declare that your residence is elsewhere and that you're not gone from the state of California temporarily. And if that's true, then of course Adam Schiff could face charges in California for violating state election rules, which require his residency. You know what really peeves me? Remember George Santos, the fabulous from Long Island? Santos was a congressman, Republican congressman, gay guy, lied about everything on his resume, basically. His whole life was a lie, but he was entertaining, and he was actually a decent congressman. I still follow him on X. He's a good read. He's funny. So he gets charged with some election campaign finance law violations, ultimately gets convicted, I think he's shortly due to report to prison. The Republicans ousted him from the House of Representatives over the mere allegations of impropriety. You want to see the Democrats? John Thune ought to oust Adam Schiff from the Senate. He had to have him expelled for this. Adam Schiff has been one of the primary spokespeople out there for no one is above the law. Okay, fine. Then neither should Adam Schiff be above the law, right? So this is a story that I intend to pursue and to follow as time goes on. Now, the other story that I think is fascinating, just really fascinating to me, is Colbert. Everybody here is freaking out about this, that Colbert's Late Show was canceled. Now, what I didn't get into last week, I didn't realize how bad it was. Apparently, it was losing $40 to $50 million a year. Let's look at 200 staffers work on his program. And Paramount basically said it's purely a financial decision. Now, what's fascinating is, remember that vote on the rescissions package? July 16th, last week, they go around the vote-a-rama on the rescissions package. It ends around 5:30 in the afternoon, local time in Washington. It becomes clear that the rescissions package is going to pass. Now, the rescissions package basically cut funding to NPR, PBS, and a lot of other Democrat slush funds. Colbert says the day after this, on the 17th, that he found out that his show would not be renewed the evening before. Isn't this kind of interesting that the very evening that it becomes clear that the DOJ cuts essentially would be passed by the Senate, by Congress, CBS decides to make a purely financial decision to dump the show that's losing all this money a year? I'm getting ahead of this. I'm just saying that it is very possible that in the coming weeks we find out that there was actual money coming from either through PBS, through various agencies, money going to Paramount to have this stupid show on the air that platformed only, exclusively Democrats. If you think about it, it's astonishing. So that's one thing. Now, if you listen to the libs, they're all out there talking how this is just the absolute worst thing. Mary Jung Fast says this is like McCarthyism. This is crazy.
You say Colbert's cancellation, simply not funny. Yes, simply not funny, but also really scary, right? And even if it's not quid pro quo, the idea of self-censorship, and I talk about my grandfather Howard Fast, who was jailed by McCarthy during the House on Un-American Activities, that our government has done this before, that history is very much filled with moments like this. And I think it's important that we take a 20,000-foot view of it because of that, because there are ways to come back from government misuse of power like this. But it certainly is very scary.
McCarthyism. Is she a lunatic? Charlemagne the God, podcaster to Democrats and people who smoke pot, says that Colbert's cancellation is a signal that authoritarian rule is getting through. It's Nazism.
This is textbook authoritarian rule. Target your critic, centralize power in a few hands, intimidate through punishment or removal. And you know what that usually does? Shuts people the F up. Okay, tightens control over public discourse, sends a message to all media outlets that criticism of Trump could cost you access, approval, editorial control, or your job. This is what authoritarian regimes do. They weaponize legal systems to punish dissent and control messaging. What happened with Paramount and Trump is intimidation tactics disguised as legitimate legal action. I thought this was the administration that didn't believe in censorship. I thought this was the administration that believed in free speech. They do until you criticize them. Paramount and CBS should be ashamed of themselves, and you can't trust anything you see on Paramount, CBS moving forward. Did y'all even think about how this will impact any of your news programming? We the people already don't trust most news outlets in America, which is why the podcast and online business is booming, because people with no corporate connections, no corporate interests are able to speak freely, even though they may be really misinformed. But that's what people are going, and that's what people are trusting, because even though it might be misinformation, it feels more honest. Okay, we can't trust any news or opinion programming that comes from Paramount now. They are obviously compromised.
This is on Saturday. He said this on Saturday. 24 hours after Tulsi Gabbard drops the reveal that everything that the Democrats talked about, including night after night on Colbert, was fabricated from start to finish. This guy's got a following of like millions of people. My gosh. But actually, unbeknownst to him and his pea brain, Charlemagne the God, that's what he calls himself. I'm not calling him that. That's his little moniker. He stumbles on something that's really important. Robbie, how many people in a week watch Charlemagne the God versus how many people a week tune into a show like, well, we're going to talk about Colbert, The Late Show. This is, well, I don't have Charlemagne the God's numbers here right in front of me, but I mean, Gutfeld, let's look at Gutfeld, right? Gutfeld averages 3 million viewers with 365,000 viewers in the key demographic, 25 to 54. Colbert averaged 1.9 million total viewers with a 200,000 viewers among a key demographic. And Gutfeld's show literally has, 25 people working on it. Gutfeld gets paid fair amount of money. Breakfast Club, like Charlemagne's show, Robbie just getting this up here, 4.5 million weekly listeners. How many people? What kind of a staff does he have? Again, maybe 20, 30 people. The economics of this are what's driving it. And my only point with the odd timing of the rescission cuts and the cancellation of the show is that the real scandal may be that our taxpayer dollars may have been used to prop up a failing piece of pro-Democrat propaganda. And every Democrat that screams about this is either willfully ignorant of the facts or is hiding what I think is going to be quite a large scandal. We come back, let's talk about polling. Speaking of scandal, even the Democrats can't deny how badly their brand has suffered. And that's before all these revelations about the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. So the Democrats not doing well in the polls. Trust in Democrats at an all-time low. Kate Bolduan confirms that polling is bad for Democrats. And this was an interesting exchange because, of course, the data's there. She's got Representative Susan DelBene, who's a Democrat from Washington State, and DelBene tries to put a positive spin on this. The conversation begins with Bolduan going into the numbers and going, look, this is bad. And then the Congresswoman, the Democratic Congresswoman, says, yeah, but people love Democrats. They love us, and we're got exciting people on the front lines and genuine candidates, and we're just doing so well. And then, of course, the response here is a bit of a shutdown of the Congresswoman.
The polling suggests, though, that the American people are not with you in trusting Democrats right now. There seems to be a disconnect in in the strength you see in candidates and how the American people view their Democratic members of Congress right now.
Actually, when you talk to people about their representative, when you talk to people about the folks that have won, especially in these swing districts, remember that's what decides the majority, these swing districts, these purple districts across the country, we won in Trump districts. We continue to have incredible candidates who want to run because they see what's happening across the country and they want to stand up. So I know we have great folks who are running. Some have announced already. More and more folks who want to make sure that we have a Congress that's going to stand up for working families. Republicans are just falling in line with Donald Trump over and over again, giving up their authority as a co-equal branch of government. The American people hate that, and that's why we have such strong response across the country.
Word salad that I wasn't even following. Were you? So if she thinks that the answer is more genuine candidates that can win elections that are connecting and resonating with people, Robbie, I have an idea. Because back from the dead, Hunter Biden came out of hiding to give an interview. And already people, Democrats, are saying this guy should run for office. And I'm sitting here going, yes, yes, yes. Oh, dear God, yes, everything. Please, please, please make the stars align. Maybe if Adam Schiff gets ousted, the Democrats could run him in his place. Now, wouldn't you be lucky to have me have this snippet of this interview that was aired today on Channel 5, Andrew Callahan sitting down with Hunter Biden? What does Hunter sound like these days? Well, one might argue perhaps someone with political ambitions. Here he's discussing immigration and giving a rather impassioned and, might I say, potty-mouthed condemnation of the president's administration's policies.
All these Democrats say, you have to talk about and realize that people are really upset about illegal immigration. You. How do you think your hotel room gets cleaned? How do you think you got food on your table? Who do you think washes your dishes? Who do you think does your garden? Who do you think is here by the sheer just grit and will that they figured out a way to get here because they thought that they could give themselves and their family a better chance. And he's somehow convinced all of us that these people are the criminals?
You know, why doesn't he just replace illegal immigration with slavery? Who do you think's doing your picking your cotton? Who do you think is cleaning your kitchen? Who do you think is? I mean, does he understand how awful it is if you examine it logically, if you carry it through. The very premise, of course, of illegal immigration is that you're getting cheap labor. Now, if you have a state like California where you have super high minimum wage, why is that labor so cheap? Well, maybe because they're living in the shadows. And living in the shadows means that they don't get paid officially, which means they can be paid less. You can circumvent law, federal and state. A firm like mine, a company like mine, obviously we have to hire people legitimately, so I get to pay the minimum wage. Now, of course, I'm not a minimum wage shop, but you know, that's the struggle for companies in California that are doing it the right way. You want to know or guess why it is that, you know, that Democrats and their brand are in the toilet? Because they talk like this. They talk like Dixiecrats. Hell, it's Sheets Bird is coming back from the dead. Who cleans your bathrooms? And by the way, an interview making the rounds for its authenticity and succinctness is a condemnation of California Democrats as well. And that's the president of In-N-Out talking about why In-N-Out is leaving the great state of California.
Raising a family is not easy here. Doing business is not easy here. Now, the bulk of our stores are still going to be here in California, but it will be wonderful having an office out there, growing out there.
Totally.
And being able to have the family and other people's families out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that, it's two-part. We'll have everybody under one roof here in Baldwin Park, and we'll close our fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big transition. And that's happening in the next few years, right?
Yeah, we've kind of, you know, given it a longer runway so that it's smoother for everybody so they can plan and all of that. And we gave them a lot of notice, you know, because we love them and want to make it as easy as possible. But by 2030, we'll close the Irvine office.
Yeah. Irvine, California, and Baldwin Park headquarters getting slowly relocated out to Tennessee. Bye-bye, California. Everything the Democrats touch turns to poo. Forgive me my language. All right, we'll have lots to talk about this week, folks. No shortage of topics. Be back tomorrow. Stay safe out there. We got this. The light at the end of the tunnel is not an oncoming train.